We'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast was produced, the Gadigal People of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present. This episode contains discussions of mental ill health and suicide. If this raises any issues for you, support is available through the links and phone numbers in the show notes.
It's 1996 and we're in Coffs Harbour with Detective Allan Sparkes. He's on duty with his colleague Gavin when they get a call. A young boy has been washed into a stormwater drain after days of torrential downpour. There's more rain on the way. They have to act quickly. Allan jumps in and follows the child's screams through the maze of the drain system. After almost drowning himself, news comes through that the boy has been heard some 600 metres away. A grueling hour later, Allan finds the boy, pulls him into his arms and tries to calm him down. When they come out of the drain, news cameras are there to capture the moment. Shortly after the dramatic rescue, he's in the fetal position in the shower. Allan is a hero, but he doesn't feel like one. I'm at Middleton, and this is Head Game. Today, the real cost of working on the front line and how hope saved Allan Sparkes. Allan Sparkes, welcome to Head Game. Now, you're a former detective and you're in the police force for the majority of your career. Why did you want to join the police force?
I originally wanted to be a geologist. My dad took me up to a little place called Glengarry near Lightning Ridge many years ago, before I finished school, and we were opal mining, and I really loved gems and opals and Lord knows. But then I couldn't afford to go to university, so it was, what else can I do? And a friend of my dad's was a policeman, and he spoke to me about joining the police force. And at that stage, I was a shearer. I was still only very young and only finished high school, and I was jackarooing and working in the land and became a shearer. And I was toyed, do I join the cops? Do I stay shearing? Because I was playing rugby and loving my rugby and loving working as a shearer. And they said, well, why don't you go and try it out? If you don't like it, come back playing footy and keep shearing. So I said, okay. So I joined up 2 weeks after I turned 19. And
so young.
Yeah. Wow. And I come from a little village out in the central west of New South Wales, and so I was then 250 people in the village. So to come into Sydney and to go to training at Redfern, and then my first station was Darlinghurst in King's Cross. So that was a serious eye-opener for me as a young kid. And I absolutely loved it. It was just full of excitement and new experiences. Every day was new experiences. And certainly there were things I was never exposed to previously that obviously goes with first response work. And I went in and I was a young cop on the beat at King's Cross at 19, back in the days when there's only two of us on the beat. So night shifts, afternoon shifts were challenging at times physically. I really liked the idea of becoming a detective, and I started my plainclothes career at Darlinghurst. And there were some absolutely brilliant detectives who worked in that area, who were great mentors, great educators, great advisors, and good friends. And I loved working there. And then some years later, another detective came there who was quite notorious in Australia. And one night he and I didn't see eye to eye, so he shafted me and I did a sidestep, went to the detectives course where I became a lecturer in the detectives course, where I met my now wife. But also there was another member of that class who featured significantly in my life later on, Pete Addison. Pete was murdered at Crescent Head some years later. And Pete was an absolutely wonderful man. And so after the detectives course, I bailed out for a while, then went back to the cops, and then went to South Region Breaking Squad, which was an area where we specialised in targeting organised crime, pretty much sort of the heavies of Sydney crime, heavies of Australian crime, the gangsters. And that was an amazing squad to work in. I really loved that. And then I wanted to get into some real estate. Deb and I had started a relationship by this stage. And Sydney, I just couldn't afford it. So there was a vacancy came up at Coffs Harbour. So I spoke to Deb and said, look, I'd like to go up there, maybe get started in real estate, maybe come back. So Deb, she was then working at the surveillance unit, which is like an undercover unit, and she also transferred up about a year after I started there. And, stayed there until I unfortunately became very unwell and lost my career, and the rest is history, as they say.
You get a call back in 1996. Take me back to that call where you got a call out for a young boy that got washed into a stormwater drain.
I remember that day so clearly, and I was working with a guy called Gavin Dengate, and Gav was my workmate at Coffs Harbour, and we were investigating the theft of some jewellery from a lady who was in a nursing home. That's all she had left from her marriage. Her husband had passed, and her jewellery had been stolen. So we had executed a search warrant, and we recovered the jewellery, and we arrested the person who stole it. And I remember that morning we went to the nursing home, and after we'd photographed and logged the jewellery, we gave it back to this old lady. And she was just in tears. She never expected to see it again. And that, as a cop, there are some times where you go, I've actually done some really good today. And Gav and I, it wasn't a major crime, but it meant the world to this woman. And what we were able to achieve meant the world for her. And I'm quite sure that she would have been at peace for the rest of her life because she got a jewellery
It's
back.
Amazing that you remember that. Petty crime like that, but the effect that it has on someone.
Yeah.
And the result that you give them.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's part of our job, is to make a difference in people's lives. Mm-hmm. So then we went back to the station. We were just having a cup of tea, and I remember we were standing in the meal room near the sink, and when the police issue an urgent job, you get two distinct beeps over the radio. And then it said, any car in the vicinity of whatever street it was, boy swept into a stormwater pipe. And normally that's a job that uniform would attend, not detectives. It's not a stormwater drain, which is a large thing you can actually walk into. Mm-hmm. This is a narrow pipe. So I remember Gav and I, we just looked at each other and just threw our cups in the sink, raced downstairs, jumped in the car, took off up to this street. And we got there, and we'd had 5 days of absolutely torrential rainfall at Coffs Harbour. So everything was flooded. And we got to the scene. There were 2 little boys. They were saturated. And there was a workman there, an adult male. And we said to the kids, what's happened? They said, Jai's disappeared. I said, where's he disappeared, mate? And they pointed to this whirlpool.
No.
And I've gone, oh, shit.
Were they playing in the whirlpool?
Yeah, they've been playing on their boogie boards in the flooded creek.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing was flooded, and this whirlpool was massive, was just swirling around. And I thought, great, what are we going to do? And then the workman said, look, you can actually get access to look down the drain across the road. So we ran across the road and...
And there's just 2 of you?
Yeah. So we lifted up the concrete covers, we took our guns and handcuffs off, threw those in the car, we jumped into the drain, and we looked down. We could see what we thought was a little boy's body down the pipe. And I think the workman, he gave us a rope. Gav wanted to go down, and I said to Gav, look, I'll go down, I'll grab him, I'll give you 3 tugs and I've got him, pull me back. So I started to go down, and I realised this rope's going to snap. And then I'm down there. So I tugged on the rope. Gav pulled me back up to the surface. And I'd only gone down a few metres. And by that stage, the State Emergency Service were there, other cops were there. And I say this all the time, but I thank God the professionals here, they'll take over. And they just gave me a bigger rope and put me back down that train.
Get back down.
So then I went...
You're committed anyway. You might as well continue, yeah.
And then I still remember, I'm not a small man. I think at that stage I was probably punching 100 plus kilos. Mm-hmm. I'm 6'2", and this water literally just carried me down like a leaf. I was weightless. The power of this water.
So if that done that to you, were you thinking, "Wow,
yeah,
what's it done to this little boy?"
Yeah, and our reasoning was, if we get him out, if he's dead, we have a chance of reviving him. If he's alive, we've got to get him out before it rains again and he gets washed away.
And what was going through your mind?
Yeah, I'm a very positive person. I thought, no, he's alive. We'll get him out and we'll get him back home. It'll be right. So the focus was get to him, and I had a torch with me, like a mag light, I think. And it's been estimated I went down 80 metres down the pipe, and by the time we got to where we thought it was him, the light showed up was just like it was a branch that was giving these weird shadows. And I go,
So what you thought was the boy?
Wasn't the boy, no. Then
This is 80 metres in.
Yeah, no, this is not good. So I've tugged 3 times on the rope. Thank God Gavin was in the drain. He could see what was going on. So as soon as I tugged on the rope, they stopped the free flow. So I've stopped, and my bulk, I've actually dammed myself in. So suddenly I'm engulfed in water, and this water is so powerful. And my first thought was, I hope the guy that tied a really good bowline around my waist, because all I had was just a rope under my arms. So then they started to pull me back, and I'm not in a good position here. I thought, I'm going to die here. I'm going to drown. And
so you've got this backwash just engulfing you.
Yeah, I'm pretty well submerged under the water, being pulled backwards by all the SES guys, the cops up on the surface pulling me
no
back.
proper equipment, just a rope around your body.
Yeah. So I remember sort of sometimes I'd like create a bit of an arch, make an air pocket, grab a quick breath, get under the water and go back under the water again. And then I've got back to the surface, thankfully. And then we were just standing around going, we have to find ways into this drain. We've got to try and leapfrog down the drain to try and find him. And then a call came over the radio to say they can hear a child screaming down at the Pacific Highway. And mentally I've gone, that's a long way away. That's a seriously long way away. And it turns out from where we were, it was about, as the crow flies, 500 metres.
It's like a maze down there, right?
Yeah, there's this pipe. I mean, I know it went to a certain direction, but when we got down to the highway, the Pacific Highway is all blocked off. There's people everywhere. And we jumped out of the car and could hear the screams of a child.
What's going through your head when you're hearing the screams?
Confusion, absolute confusion. Like, I thought the kid was dead. I thought we were looking for a body recovery, yeah. I thought, there's no way this kid can be alive. I thought he's trapped against a grate somewhere, he's dead. But then to hear the screams, I thought, no, he's actually alive. So my brain's going, dead, alive, no, he's alive. But Michael Marr, the paramedic, Michael was laying on his tummy with his head down into this manhole. And we ran over and the water was bubbling up in the manhole, but the screams are coming up through the water. And like, I'm even more confused by this stage. So I said, I want a scuba tank, I want a regulator, because I had done some scuba diving. I said, they're the 2 things I want. And somebody produced a ladder and plunked it down the manhole. And there's actual TV footage of Gavin trying to squeeze his way down.
Oh, there's camera crews that's turned up. You got the emergency services. You've got everyone that's now overwatching this.
Yep. And at some stage, I don't know when, but I took my suit pants off and I'm there in my boxer shorts.
As you do.
My PPEs. Anyway, so Gav's, we're all there, but these screams, and these are terrifying screams. You know, a child screaming for their life. It was terrifying. So they put another rope around me and I'm going, no, don't want that. Gav went down, straight down the ladder. He disappeared under the water. I followed him down, and the water's not clear. It's obvious, it's floodwater. It's filthy, it's muddy. Gav disappeared. I went down and I'm under the water trying to feel my way around, and we both come up in the junction of 6 of these pipes, which were pouring in on top of us.
Have you got a head torch on? Is it pitch black down there?
No, it's pitch black. We haven't got a torch. We've got nothing. And we weren't communicating. We just knew what we thought we had to do, and that was to search to try and find which pipe he was up.
Follow the voice, right?
Yeah. And we searched a couple of pipes each, and then one I went up. I thought, it's this one. I've got to take a punt. I think it's this one. Because we were conscious, if it rains again, we're all dead. Because downpour, we're dead. We're not going to get out.
You're done.
So I said to Gav, look, I think it's this one. Can you try and find a way into this pipe? So I regret that decision in hindsight.
Why is that? Why do you regret it?
Gav should have been there with me to rejoice in the success we eventually had. Yeah. Gav deserved to be there for that moment in life. And I've always regretted that I asked Gav to leave the drain system.
And why did you make that decision? What was going through your head? Was it his safety or?
No, it was to try and get to this kid as quickly as we could. If I couldn't get to him, maybe up some other way. Unbeknownst to us, the council was bringing down a backhoe. They were going to dig up the highway to try and find this kid. That's how desperate it was. And so Gav went up, and then Michael Marr, paramedic, came down, and he gave me a torch. And I think he insisted I put a rope around my tummy, but this time I'm on my fingernails and toenails crawling up this pipe to try and get to where I think the kid is. And again, these screams are just doing my head in. And I'm crawling up, literally crawling in amongst the concrete and the crap that's in a concrete pipe. And it's shoulder width apart. And I was watching your show the other night where they did the exercise being in the water pipe.
Yeah, that's
and I think, wow, okay, I know what that's like.
The last series of SAS.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm crawling up the pipe. Michael Marr is behind me, screaming at me, "Have you got him yet? I've got him. Have you got him yet?"
How long have you been down there? You're cold, you're wet.
I'm freezing.
You're miserable.
We're freezing. And all I can hear is this kid screaming, Michael screaming. So I'm screaming at Michael, like, shut the F up. I'm trying to call to the kid, "It's okay, mate, I'm coming.
Could he hear your voice? Was he responding?
No, he'd lost it. He was hysterical. He was no doubt hypothermic. He'd been in there for 45 minutes hanging on for dear life because he's just hanging on to a log that's jammed across the pipe. If that log wasn't there, he was dead because he would have got washed down to a grate. There was no way that he would have survived. So he's been hanging on there in the pitch dark with this water just powering onto his body, screaming and screaming for his life. And suddenly, no doubt, he can see torchlight, but I don't know whether he understands what it is. And I wasn't thinking about, does he know? I'm just trying to get to him. I'm absolutely desperate. And I started to pray, like, please, God, let me get to him. Please don't let him get washed away. And I kept crawling. And I can picture it to this absolute moment in time. My torchlight finally picked up his face. That's all I could see was just his face. And the illumination of the torch hitting his face, it was like I saw a ghost. And it is so vivid in my memory. And I coaxed him to come towards me because I thought, I'm not going to get to him.
How far were you away from him when you saw him?
Oh, and probably 10 metres. And I was about 30 metres up the pipe.
Still a way to go, right?
Yeah, so
especially
I'd crawl
against the water.
Yeah, so I'd crawl 30 metres on my guts to get to him. And then he got washed down to me, and I've got hold of him. And I was like, holy God, I've got him. And out of the blue, I just say, thank you, God. And I'm not a religious person, Ant. I'm a very spiritual person. But I said, you say thank you, God. And this little boy, he just said, oh, thank you, God. And he started to bawl his eyes out. And I did. I started to bawl my eyes out.
So you have this moment where you've got him in your arms, he's gripping you. Is he calming down, or is he just still hysterical?
He had basically just collapsed with exhaustion, with emotion, with a sense of, I feel safe now. This man's got me. I feel safe. And then I somehow pushed him under me, and then he got washed down to Michael Marr, the paramedic. Michael's got him, assessed him. Then Michael swam him under the water, got to where the manhole was. Michael climbed up the ladder. Then the TV footage camera's rolling, and they reached down and they pull this little kid out of the drain. And he just comes up like a drowned rat. And they put him on the ambulance gurney, wrap him up in an emergency blanket. His mum's there. She's been there through the whole thing. She was hearing her child screaming for their life. They wrap him up in the blanket. Her mum's just hugging him. And I get out of the pipe. I go to the car, and I'm sitting in the passenger seat of this car. And I was cold. I remember being really cold.
How long have you been down there for?
And I don't know.
How long had he been down there for?
At least 45 minutes. And halfway down the pipe, he saw some light, and he reached up and he grabbed hold of a grate in the side of the road. Because his vision impaired, his glasses went flying as soon as he got sucked off the boogie board. Evidently, he tells me that he could see shapes, and he just started to scream for help. And then the water just washed him away another 300 metres. So he's been washed 600 metres down the pipe.
Wow.
And then I'm in the car and I'm in shock. I remember going back to the police station. Deb, my wife, she was a cop there. She's in her office. She's in a child protection unit. So she's in her office, and for some reason they had the radio turned down. So she didn't know anything that was going on. And she saw the car pull up, and she looked out. She saw Gavin get out in his pants and shirt, saturated, holding his gun and handcuffs. She's gone, oh, that's strange. Then she saw me get out in my boxer shorts, holding my gun in handcuffs.
Yeah, well, she's thinking, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, and everything. I had a lot of blood on my back and other stuff. I've
You had
just
blood
gone
on your back?
Yeah, from all
Were you bleeding or?
Yeah, from all the like cutting myself on the concrete pipe because it was so narrow and trying to squeeze myself around. So I went into the crime scene and I've just jumped straight in the shower just to wash all this. I felt filthy. And Deb found me. I was just curled up in a ball on the bottom of the shower cest, just sobbing my heart out.
Straight after the incident?
Yeah.
It's affected you straight away?
Yeah, I've had a serious, how do you say, looking at it scientifically, I think I went from being in a sympathetic nervous state into a massive parasympathetic. I'm safe, I'm warm, I'm okay, and like my body has just shut down.
And what are you thinking when you're in that state?
At this stage, I don't remember thinking anything. I remember Deb consoling me, but she didn't know what in the hell had happened. She had no idea what had happened. She's just there hugging me. And then I got myself together, went home, had a proper shower, got changed, went back to work. And then like the reporters were up there asking Gavin and I questions and interviewing us, and then we went and had lunch.
And this is all over the news. It's everywhere, right?
Yeah, it's national news.
The moment you step out the door, you're being harassed. People are on you, right?
No, there was more because they were all local reporters who we knew. It was just Coffs Harbour's not a big place, and they just wanted to come up and talk to me and all that sort of stuff. And then we went out for lunch, and then I worked that afternoon, and then we went to the pub and absolutely got smashed that night. Then the next day I had to go down to the police academy to start the homicide investigators course. And I remember for that week I was away, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the screams of this kid.
And the kid's face, right?
You
talk about the torch and seeing his face.
Yeah.
Do you still see his face?
I do, yeah, but it's a good thing. Yeah, I'm really good with that. But by this stage, Ant, I'd already started to develop post-trauma-like symptoms from the incident at Crescent Head where my colleagues were murdered. That was the most...
When was that?
That was in July 95, and the rescue was May 96. So wow. I had already started to develop post-trauma-like symptoms, and I was chronically stressed by the time the rescue happened. And I realised now...
And that was the nail in the coffin?
Pretty much, mate, yeah. And after that, things all turned south. I did develop full-blown PTSD and depression and suicidal ideation. And on the 6th of October 96, that was the day I decided to end my life. And I went to work. I'd kissed Deb goodbye, kissed my little daughter goodbye, and went to work. And went towards the bathroom to end my life. And a colleague walked in, and I've done a mental calculation. I think I was 8 seconds away from ending my life before the guy walked in.
And this is all from the knock-on effects of your job, right?
Well, it is, but what I realise, and I've done a lot of work in the mental health sector for many years. You know, I've been a deputy commissioner at the Mental Health Commission. I currently work with a psychologist. We run a great training program, and I work with the cops. I run a training program for the cops. It's understanding that when you become burned out or chronically stressed, as you would know from the military, you then become vulnerable to significantly traumatic events or potentially traumatic events. It's when you're burned out that you are the most vulnerable. And if something does happen, by then you haven't got anything left to be resilient with. You're cooked. And these significantly traumatic events, they can smash you. And they did. They smashed me.
But when did you realise that you had a serious problem? Was it that day that you wanted to take your life, or was there a moment where you thought to yourself, I need help, I need to... Yeah, and your help was to end your life? And going back to that moment, you say someone walked in on you. Mm. How did they stop you? How close? You say you were 8 seconds away. That's serious.
I was going to the door into our office. Across the corridor, which is 1.5 meters, across the corridor is a door to the bathroom. I was at the door to the office when a colleague walked in, like almost bumped me, looked at me and was going, mate, are you okay? And I said, no, I'm not. I used an expletive. I said, no, I'm not. I realised that I was mentally unwell. But because back then, and still to this day, the stigma of declaring you're mentally unwell, I knew if I had declared my career would be over, and I was terrified of losing my career. Like, with respect to you and your colleagues, Ant, the military, it's your life, it's your sense of purpose, your worth.
Yeah, it's your identity, it's your purpose, it's who you are.
Yes. Yeah. So to lose that is terrifying, which compounds the mental ill health you're experiencing. You develop a fear which, there's a term for it, your HPA axis. It's the way your body controls your stress. So I realised that my HPA axis had become dysfunctional. And I was so sleep deprived. I was using alcohol as a form of medication. I was eating terrible food. I was smoking like a chimney. I was doing everything wrong, but not knowing that the things I was doing wrong were having such a knock-on effect.
Yeah.
So
you're trying to mask everything. You're trying to numb the pain, numb everything that's going on inside of you. Right? Yeah. And this is 1996.
96, yeah.
Like you said back then, though, it was like, shut up and put up and, man up.
Yeah, and
just get a grip of yourself and crack on, right?
Yeah, and I realise now, Ant, that prior to that, policemen did take their own lives. And I think part of the reason for that was the stigma of being mentally unwell, losing your career, everything that goes with losing it, it just becomes unbearable. And you do develop a physical pain that is indescribable and unbearable. And the pain overwhelms every part of your life.
And you're still functioning normal, even though... So after that moment when you wanted to take your life, you just cracked on as normal?
No,
did they give you time off? Did they...
That was the last day I worked as an operational police officer. I then was on sick leave. That night I was taken to the hospital before a crisis counsellor. Because of these nightmares I've been having horrible nightmares, not about hurting me, but hurting other people very close to me. And when I disclosed this to the counsellor, she's gone, oh my goodness, Deb, we're going to have to schedule Elle.
What type of nightmares?
Hurting family members. So that's when I thought, I can't risk my family. I need to protect them.
I mean, you scared you were going to action that through your nightmares?
I wasn't scared. I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified that something was going to snap in me, and I wasn't prepared for that, Ant. I couldn't risk my family. I don't think I would ever... I know I would never have done anything, but I wasn't prepared to risk it. So that's the reason I decided to end my life. Yeah. So that night they wanted to schedule me, which basically means they restrain you in a psychiatric hospital. And Deb was with me, and she said, "No, sorry, you're not going to do that to my husband," because Deb knew that if they had scheduled me, I would have taken my life. So she took me home on the promise that she'd bring me back the next day. And the next day I went to what they call a police medical officer, who's a local GP, who I had assisted doing postmortems and things. I love the man. He played rugby for Scotland, and I'm a rugby fanatic. And I remember I'm in there, and I'm sobbing, and Deb's with me, and he pulls out a bottle of scotch and a packet of Winfield Blues. So he pours me a big swatch. Gives me a fag. I'm there smoking, scotching, bawling my eyes out. He rang the local psychiatrist. There was only one psychiatrist. Sent me straight up there. And that was a really horrible experience, I've got to say.
Why?
Just the shame and the humiliation, the guilt. It was absolutely horrible, and I just wanted to end it there.
So these suicidal thoughts are still ongoing?
They are then. I think they're reinforced then because I felt so much shame. I just felt an overwhelming sense of hopelessness and worthlessness, like beyond comprehension. And the psychiatrist was very blunt. He said, "Al, do you want to live or do you want to die?" And I said, "I don't particularly want to die, but I'm terrified of what's going to happen. I might hurt my family." And he said, "Look, if you want to live, I'll do my best to help you. But if you want to die, I honestly don't know what to do." He said, your call. You make a decision basically right now what you want to do." And I said, "I want to live." He said, "Okay, let's start that." And he started to talk about PTSD, which I knew nothing about, started to talk about depression. I knew something about depression.
PTSD back then wasn't really a thing. It was you suffer a little bit from mental health issues.
Yeah,
and
I had no idea, no idea. So then he put me on a drug called Adderall, which is such a strong sedative. You can't form an intent to hurt you or anyone. And I was on that for 2 weeks, and I became a zombie, absolute zombie. All I could do was smoke, make coffee. So then it was a case of having to agree to see the psychiatrist 3 days a week, which was also the local mental health clinic, which was also the local methadone clinic. So I would be sitting in the waiting room with all the local heroin addicts who had arrested and charged.
How'd that make you feel?
Oh, so worthless. So worthless. I was so ashamed, Ant. And that was really hard, and to leave home, to go to that psychiatric appointment 3 times a day, it was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. And I thought, if I don't go, I'll never get better. I've got to push through it. I've just got to do whatever I can to get better.
And how supportive is your wife? Is she on you 24/7? Is she at your side?
She has never left my side.
Wow.
Since pretty much the first day we ever got together, and we're still together. And she was phenomenal, and it would have been so hard for her. She had a really hard job, young child, and Deb was investigating the sexual and physical abuse of children. That was her job, so she had a really tough job. And she's trying to care for me. She had no idea about mental illness. I had no idea about mental illness. I was on these drugs. I was on antidepressants. And the best the psychiatrist was basically do was explain what PTSD was, what depression was, how I developed it, why I developed it.
And what was the trigger? Why did you develop it?
Crescent Head was certainly the start of it.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, but the start of it was when I became so chronically stressed. And I became chronically stressed through a lot of issues at work. And I can look back through all that now, and I've spent years analysing it, working with clinicians to help me understand why. Why did I end up so destroyed? And what I can do, not only to help me never go back there, but what I can do to help cops, first responders, not get to where I got to.
And when you were going through that, how did the police force manage that with you? Did they sort of cut you off? And, yeah.
That's how it was back then.
Especially back then, yeah. That's why I asked, because I know what it'd be like. Yeah, you're on sick leave. He's no good to us.
No, get rid of him. So 18 months later, I got a phone call from headquarters congratulating me. I'm going, what are you congratulating me for? And they said, your last day of work was 2 weeks ago. And I've gone, what are you talking about? I said, I've never applied for any discharge. And they said, not our problem, all the very best. See you later.
You didn't know anything about that?
No.
Not pre-warned, nothing?
No. Some public servant from headquarters rings me and tells me my last day of service is over and done with.
Do you come back onto the job, or you just you're off the job and then all of a sudden you go back to work and they tell you?
I'm not back at work. I was at home. I got a phone call at home. But the wonderful thing is today, and there are police officers who have been diagnosed with PTSD, who are under current diagnosis of PTSD, and some on medication who are still serving full operational duties. And I go, that is absolutely fantastic. And I think those who have experienced mental ill health, such as PTSD or trauma-related mental illnesses, if you've recovered from it, you have this amazing insight into what it's like, and you know the warning signs, you know what you need to do. And so for years I have been very determined about looking after my physical and psychological health. I know what we all need to do to make sure. And the training program that I run for the police, and the training program my clinical psych colleague and I run, is called Operational Readiness. The need to be physically and psychologically ready to do your job. And as you as a Special Forces military person, you know the critical importance of being operationally ready. Because if you're not, the risk is exponential to you, to your teammates, to everybody, to your mission. The risk,
to your colleagues.
Yeah. So that's about understanding how you become chronically stressed or burnt out, what you need to do to minimise the risk of that developing, what you can do yourself to reverse that, so that you do not become exposed to trauma-related mental illnesses. You can build up resilience, and I like to use the term endurance. I like to build up physical and psychological endurance to cope with crisis, because as first responders, you are continually faced with crisis, one after the other. So your ability to build resilience can be challenged. So you've got to endure the crisis. And that is because you've got to be physically and psychologically as best you can be. Simple as that.
Yeah, because it's crisis after crisis after crisis.
Yeah.
Enjoying that.
Yeah.
And flipping that for resilience, right?
Correct.
Because if you don't flip that to resilience, it's going to have the detrimental effect that it had on you.
Deb and I, we were married in Paris.
Yeah.
We spent 5 months riding our push bikes around Europe. We rode 6,000 kilometres around Europe on our push bikes. So we came back to work in September 1993. We were both physically and psychologically at top of our games. Okay. So pretty much about December 93, I got involved in an investigation that was the biggest, most intense investigation of my whole police career. And that was the starting point of the domino effect. I can see where I started to go from the mental health continuum, where you break your psychological health into 4 colours. Coming back from our honeymoon, I was in the green zone. Probably by May the next year, I was into the yellow, teetering on the orange zone. Deb had a lot of crisis with our firstborn. She was critically unwell. That didn't help. And then this situation at work, there's a lot of conflict at work. Crescent Head, because of all the things that happened at Crescent Head, I was in the emergency action team. That night, Pete was murdered. Bob Spears was murdered. Pete was a mate of mine. There were issues that I believe were relative to Pete's murder that I think could have been avoided. There was a lot of things happened post their murders that caused a lot of conflict and caused a lot of moral injury to me.
Was there guilt there? Do you feel?
Not guilt, no. It was a fact that I think that there's a whole story about it, Ant, where the lack of communication was significant in Pete's murder. Had they've had proper communication, and you know the missions you've been on, communication is absolutely vital.
It's everything.
It is. And they were calling for assistance, but of course the radio was a radio black spot. Communications were breaking down. Bob was murdered. Pete's trying to get help for his mate. He's broken into a house to try and get to a telephone. There's a breakdown in communication with the homeowner. Pete's gone back outside, was in the process of reloading his gun, I think, to go and try and take the gunman out because they were ambushed by a gunman. And the gunman stalked him and shot him and killed him. So these were issues that I believe the coroner needed to know about. And I had that in my statement. But that evidence wasn't, how would you say, people didn't want that evidence to come out. So there's a lot of conflict over that. A whole raft of things happened which caused me to go deep into the orange zone, into the chronic stress zone. And then struggling with that, trying to do my work, trying to do this investigation still. It all just caused me to be burnt out, simple as that. But then the rescue was, as you say, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
Trying to hang on. Alcohol was a major contributor to my downfall. Sleep deprivation was a major contributor. All these things I realise now, the physiological impact on me, how I broke down physically and psychologically, I can map it, absolutely map it.
And when you left, well, when you got told that your last days were 2 weeks ago, what went through your mind?
Oh, I just wanted to end it again.
So you're going back into that spiral effect?
100%, yeah, 100%. And there was no psychiatrist, there was no psychologist, there was no one to help me except Deb. She knew that this is not good, and she just hung on to me.
So you literally grab your box, pack up your stuff, and
never went back. Never went back, except.
So they didn't even have you back. They didn't even bring you in to tell you. They just called you and said.
From headquarters in Sydney, I'm at Coffs Harbour. Yeah, there was no communication, nothing. Just discarded like a piece of crap. Yeah, which wasn't helpful. But the big investigation I started, it was a fire up in a little village way west of Coffs Harbour, and a hall had burnt down. An Aboriginal elders' home had burnt down beside it. I eventually charged the hall owner with burning both buildings down, and eventually he was found guilty. And it was the biggest investigation. It was phenomenal. And to have that conviction, and I went back to make sure that I saw that trial out. And funnily enough, the granddaughter of the beautiful Aboriginal elder whose home burnt down, she married the little boy who we saved in the drain.
Wow. So you're still in touch with the
Oh, yeah,
the little
yeah,
boy?
every day. Yeah.
Really?
We went to his wedding. Yeah.
And immediately after, do you build a relationship with him? or-
Yeah, look, he struggled, and clearly he developed PTSD horrifically.
Wow.
And his life was hell for years and years after. And he got arrested and charged many times. I used to write court references for him to try and keep him out of jail. And, he went to boys' homes and adult jails. And then one day he made a decision. He said to his mum, I'm never getting in trouble ever again. And he never has. But to go to his wedding, to be back with Auntie Beattie and the Stewart family and with Jai's family, mate, that was a special day. That was a really special day.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And how do you start, or when do you start coming out of, because now you're resilient, your mindset's in a good place. Do you still suffer from PTSD now? No. So when did that start to turn? When did you start to turn the tables and really come out of it? And how did you do that?
I think that a number of things happened. I was always searching to get my sense of worth back. And I became very successful in new careers. I became a marine investigator, became qualified as a marine surveyor. I was, on the face of it, I was successful. But in March 2009, my girls are 9 and 14. We went on one-way tickets to England. We bought a yacht and we sailed that back to Australia.
Yeah.
I still remember the morning. We're at this stage, we're crossing the Pacific Ocean. I still remember this morning, as clear as I remember Jai. The full moon was setting as the sun was coming up. And I looked to the back of the boat, and I'm actually videoing it as I'm doing it. And I've gone, I'm throwing all my past behind me. I'm throwing it overboard. I'm just letting it go.
You made a conscious decision to do that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I looked back to the bow of the boat, and we were heading for home. And I've gone, there's my future. Somewhere ahead of me is my future.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And how would you describe, from your experience, what is PTSD?
It's a living, breathing hell of unimaginable, indescribable pain and a complete sense of no control. And you're desperate for any form of control. Your life is just spinning out of control and you can't stop it.
And what are the first steps to come out of it?
Acknowledging it.
Acknowledgement.
Yep. Accepting that you are mentally unwell. And
how hard is that to accept?
Oh, it's hard, and it really is hard.
Brutally honest with yourself to say, I need help.
Yeah,
I'm not in control of my mind. I'm not in control of myself.
I have completely lost control of my life. Yeah, it is, for me, probably one of the hardest things. And I didn't know I had PTSD until the psychiatrist explained that I had it and what the symptoms, all this sort of stuff. And I go, that makes sense. But as I said, I struggled for years to accept why did I become so unwell. And I think for me that was probably the greatest moment when I've gone, okay, now I can accept it. Because when you can accept something and you understand it, then you can become at peace with it. And I'm very content with my past. I completely accept my past. And I say that gives me great confidence for the future because my past is my past. It's okay.
And now that you're in charge and you're in control, what do you do now? What's next for you? Just to do these programs, to really try and get the message out there, the word out there, because more needs to be done, let's be honest.
Of course it does.
Loads more.
Of course it does. And it's, for me, it's the start. And one day I'll pass the baton over. I'm still playing my rugby. I still love my rugby. I train with the Indigenous guys at Redfern 3 mornings a week. We do boxing there. It's a beautiful social program. I have an amazing relationship with the police and the police association. I'm so proud of what I do, Ant. I
can see that.
Yeah,
I can see that.
I'm passionate about it.
Yeah.
My colleague Dave is passionate about it. He has been amazing, and the work he does in his clinical practice, he helps a lot of men in particular who are very damaged, and he's making huge changes to their life. And those men and women, not only military but first responders, who they deserve to be cared for because of the sacrifices they've made. Yeah, we owe it to them, big time.
Mate, thank you so much. It's been such an interesting conversation. Allan, you're a gent. Keep inspiring. Keep getting the good message out there. Thank you so much, mate.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Very grateful. Thank you.
Allan's best-selling book is called The Cost of Bravery. I'll link the details in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me on Head Game. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of our incredible stories, and leave me a review wherever you're listening. I'm Matt Middleton. Catch you again next time.